Trust the process. As a long-suffering Philadelphia sports fan, I am well acquainted with this phrase. And for those of you who don't know, this quote comes from Sam Hinkie, who served as the general manager of the Philadelphia 76ers from 2013 until 2016. During that time, things were not good. The only thing that was notable during the 2013 season was that the Sixers managed to tie the NBA record for the most consecutive games lost in a season with a total of 26 in a row. With a record like that, there really wasn't any way for the Sixers or Hinkie to improve. So Hinkie decided to lose on purpose. His proposal was twofold. One was to put the Sixers in a position to get the top draft picks. Second, and more importantly, Hinkie wanted to give the draft picks he'd acquired a chance to grow. He wanted to give them time to learn and develop into the champions that he knew they could be. He wanted them to forget about winning in the short term and learn how to believe in themselves in the long term. Radical stuff, right? Most professional sports, like the NBA, think the exact opposite. If you're not a rock star right out of the gate, you will more than likely fail and lose your job, which Hinkie did in 2016. But his idea and his principle lives on. And this is the idea of making investments in future successes by learning to believe in yourself. That taking the time to develop internal traits, such as patience, hope, trust, and resiliency, have more of a long-term value than quick wins, allowing for the development of a lasting legacy instead of just a winning season. This principle of trusting the process is what came up for me while I was reading this week's Parsha, Parshat Bo. For 430 years, the long-suffering Jewish people had been laboring under the heavy yoke of Pharaoh and Egyptian slavery. However, at the end of chapter 2 in the book of Exodus, God remembered God's promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and took note of Israel's plight. Over the past 2 parshiot, we've seen that things have started to change. We've read about Moses' life, the call of God from the burning bush, 7 of the 10 plagues, and the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. And after all of that drama, the Israelites may have felt like their day of freedom and redemption may never arrive. Perhaps by waiting to hear the cry of the people and by choosing Moses and coaching him on how to negotiate with Pharaoh, God was implicitly asking them to trust the process. Finally, in chapter 12, it seems the time has come for Pharaoh to let the Jewish people go, allowing them to begin their journey from slavery towards freedom. Most of chapter 12 does involve the commandments relating to the Paschal sacrifice. But I found verse 2 to be quite interesting, and it reminded me of Hinkie's principle. HaChodesh hazeh lechem rosh chodeshim rishon, hu lechem lechodeshei hashana. This month shall mark for you the beginning of the months. It shall be the first of the months of the year for you. Upon initial reflection, this verse doesn't seem to be that extraordinary. I mean, of course God would create the Jewish calendar. How else will we know when to celebrate Passover every year? But another large part of this story is about the future. It is about our redemption, and more importantly, it's about our upcoming birth as a nation and as a people. These points were not lost on our sages. They were particularly intrigued by this verse's use of the word hazeh, which in the context or in other contexts suggests a physical pointing to something. So they asked, who is doing the pointing and for what purpose? One interpretation comes from Rabbi Ishmael. Commenting on hazeh in the Mechilta, Rabbi Ishmael says that God was telling Moses to point out the new moon to Israel and say to them, when the moon looks like this, you and all of your descendants are going to designate the new month. In this interpretation, the new moon becomes a symbol of a new beginning. Sometimes it's difficult to see new beginnings as they're happening. Sometimes we're so used to the daily grind of what we've always known that it becomes nearly impossible to detect that we're actually moving forward. The Jewish people needed assurance through a clear and tangible sign that their time of redemption had in fact arrived. But this moon is new and nearly hidden, not full and clearly visible. It would seem that through this symbol of assurance, God was telling Moses to invite Israel into the redemption process by asking them to trust where God is leading them. And like the new moon, this is a place that Israel cannot yet see for itself. Rashi also makes a comment based on the Mechilta, only this time it's from Rabbi Akiva's interpretation of hazeh. Rabbi Akiva interpreted that it was God who pointed the moon to Moses. This interpretation implies that it was Moses who could not see the new moon or a new beginning, which is why Rashi restates the verse as, "The time when the moon renews itself thusly shall be for you the beginning of the month," reminding the reader that it was God who pointed out the new moon to Moses. Rabbi Levi Yitzhak of Berdichev expands Rashi's comment in his work Kedushat Levi. In observing that it was Moses who needed to be shown by God, Rabbi Levi wondered, why did it matter to Moses to know this exact time that the renewal took place? Rabbi Levi believed that Moses was relying on the moon as a sign that all God promised concerning Israel would occur during Moses' lifetime. Moses wanted to see a big, bright full moon, not a barely visible sliver of a moon. He was concerned that maybe that sliver was not the sure sign of redemption that he had been hoping for. Rashi in the Kedushat Levi's comments seem to suggest that Moses also needed God's assurance. If you recall from Parshat Shmot, Moses was under the impression that Pharaoh would release Israel after their first meeting. Instead, Pharaoh only made the lives of the Israelites more difficult. So it was very natural for Moses to ask God, is this really it? Are we really leaving this time? In all of these texts, God is using a very subtle sign of reassurance. It is not an overt statement of instantaneous redemption. Instead, it is like the still, small voice of God, a nearly invisible sign of what will come in the future. And in this way, I see God asking Israel to trust the process. That even though it feels like things are not moving forward, or worse, moving in the opposite direction, God is still present in our lives and encouraging us to take that next step forward, even if we don't always know where we're going or how long it's going to take to get there. God is asking us to invest in our future successes by believing in ourselves and by believing in God's plan for us. These texts invited me to think about my own process of preparing for the future and what it took to get to this moment. And I realized I have been blessed to take many long journeys of uncertainty in my life. And this includes my current journey through rabbinical school. And as I looked back over the past 5 years, I remembered so many challenges. There was COVID, January 6th, October 7th, 3 chaotic election cycles, 2 new deans, and a new chancellor, just to name a few. And on some days, I didn't really know if I was coming or going. But, like the new moon, there were also some really amazing subtle steps forward into becoming a rabbi. There were the long Sunday afternoons during the COVID lockdown when I would study the weekly sugya for class, and I would feel the rabbi's words come to life before me. I remembered the many happy days of the semester I spent in Jerusalem, hearing the call of the shofar in the mornings on my walk to school. I recalled the pure bliss of celebrating the Shalosh Regalim in the Old City, and I noticed that it was sometimes in these elusive moments that I began to see God's Hazeh, and he was pointing out to me the holiness of my calling. The most important thing I remembered was how much my perspective has changed. You see, initially, I thought to be a good rabbinical student meant primarily knowing all of our sacred texts by heart, speaking perfectly fluent Hebrew, mastering Aramaic grammar, and solving all of the world's problems. And if I did those things correctly, I would have earned the right of ordination. But now that I'm nearing the end of my time here, I realize those things may be important, but they are not everything. I have come to understand that the internal attributes of faith, perseverance, resilience, and trust that I have honed during this time will serve me far better than a quick win of earning an A on that final exam. Somewhere along the way, God used this long and interesting journey to show me how to appreciate these little steps forward and to teach me to trust the process. To teach me that we don't need a dramatic sea-splitting journey in order to notice our steps forward. That we all have this ability to make investments in future successes by learning to believe in ourselves. And that sometimes the smallest of moments can propel us towards the greatest of transformations. Now this long journey of mine is nearly complete. And like the Israelites, I am hopefully awaiting my new beginning. In less than 4 months, this part of my journey will be over. And like the taste of maror with charoset, it is bittersweet. But I will always remember the time I have spent here. I will remember the lessons my teachers and fellow students have taught me, because it was in all of these small, holy moments of trusting the process that allowed me to give birth to my dream of becoming a rabbi. Kaddish de Rabbanan, page 13. Yitgadal v'kadash shemei Rabbah. V'yamad dirach yirutei v'yanlich malchutei. V'chayachon u'vyomechon v'chayet tekol beit Israel. V'agala u'v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei amen. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitrama v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shmei dekudusha v'rechu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata damiram v'yama v'imru amen. Al Israel v'al Rabbanan v'al Talmidehon v'al kol Talmidei Talmidehon v'al kol man da'askin b'raita di v'atra hadei v'di v'chol atar v'atar Yehei l'chol l'chol shalama rabba china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayim v'arachim umzana revicha u'for kana mi kodam avahon di b'shmaya v'imru amen. Yehei shalom rabba min shemaya v'chayim tovim aleinu v'kol Israel v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'ramav hu b'rachamav yaseh shalom aleinu v'kol Israel v'imru amen.
Yasher koach, Alicia, kol hakavod, and chodesh tov, everybody. Have a great day.